All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It has been a very chilly day for me over here. For some reason, this year's winter has decided to revert back to what Ohio winters / springs used to be, which means we're going to be getting some spotty-ass weather until June. Because even May is not safe from the occasional cold spike. So, since this was requested in one of my videos, I thought it would be a fun idea to spend this stream going over pulp. You know, the pulp fiction genre, different pulp heroes, how they came to be, and all that good stuff. And unlike how I normally do things where I have a bajillion tabs up top, we're just going to start with the simple questions and then go from there. Alright, so I just typed into Microsoft Bing, because yes, I have Microsoft Bing, what is pulp fiction genre? Because you have to specify pulp fiction genre, not pulp fiction, because if you try to do pulp fiction, it's just going to point you to the frickin' movie, which is annoying. Alright, so AI tells us it's fast-paced, plot-oriented storytelling. Alright. Pulp fiction is a genre categorized by fast-paced, plot-oriented storytelling of a linear nature with clearly defined, larger-than-life protagonists and antagonists, creative descriptions, clever use of turns of phrases, and other aspects of writing that add to the intensity and pacing of the story. Alright, so that tells us absolutely nothing. So we're going to go into actual articles to figure out what this is. And all of the articles and videos we're going to do today will be linked down below after the stream, because I have no idea where we're going to be going from here. Okay. Alright, this looks promising. Bookgenres.com pulp fiction definition with complete list of book genres. So, oh my god, no, go away. Okay, hide that. Okay. Alright, pulp fiction. Alright, books in the pulp fiction genre are go away! Are usually made up of lurid exploitative stories that involve one of the main characters being a hero. Often the hero saves the damsel in distress from dark and evil danger. The pulp genre started out with short stories in magazines, but has grown to novel-length illustrated works. Well, that also does not give us too much information. Let's see what Wikipedia, because there's a lot to it. Pulp fiction is not just about hero saving the damsel. So, and I'm working from memory here, pulp fiction, the genre, gets its name from pulp novels. And the reason they were called pulp novels is because they were cheap papers, or they were cheap books printed on like pulp paper. So it was cheap entertainment for the masses. And it used to be like a very wide variety of genres, but over time it kind of gained its own like genre criteria. And of course Wikipedia is just going to do the Pulp Fiction movie. Alright, this website looks promising too. Alright, what is pulp fiction? Right, because there are a lot of different like books and series that you may not have realized were considered pulp fiction because of how we look back on it now. So this is from AmericanPulps.com. Alright, usually when we tell people we write pulp fiction, the person we're talking to will ask, what is pulp fiction? This happened so much that we wrote an article about it on our website. That we used to go by the name Shit Show Pulps. That's actually kind of funny. Ironically, that article was used against us when we fought. Okay. Chandler, Big Sleep. Alright. Pulp fiction and hard-boiled crime stories are very similar, but I'd argue that hard-boil is a subgenre of the latter. Sure. A story can be pulp fiction but not hard-boiled. Science fiction is a good example of this, but a hard-boiled story like Mickey's Spillane's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Mike Hammer series could also be considered pulp fiction. It's dark, gritty, it's not something you read in polite company. Nowadays, pulp fiction is a generic term often thought to be invented by... It is not invented by Quentin Tarantino. Alright. Okay. Pulp fiction, like the detective story, is arguably an American invention, and both are intertwined. The detective story's roots began in Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue. Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe is mostly known for his horror, but he has done quite a few detective and mystery stories, too. And it's argued that he's one of the godfathers of the murder mystery, which kickstarted the genre that we know today. Like Poe, pulp was considered inferior to other literary achievements of the day. It was dark, gruesome, and hard-hitting, and the writers didn't give two shits about what the critics thought. They had to eat. Yep, just write whatever you think you want to write, or if you think people want to read, and just collect your paycheck and move on to the next story. Pulp evolved from the penny dreadfuls and dime novels of the Gilded Age. They were written at breakneck speed and meant to be consumed in the same manner. In the 1880s, Ergosi magazine, which is considered the first of the pulps, was founded. Oh wow, pulps stretch back that far. Printed on cheaper pulpwood paper, these stories were cranked out rapidly, and the freelance writers, getting paid a penny a word, kept the stories coming. That seems like a good system for the day. Nowadays, doesn't work that way. Alright. Pulp fiction isn't all detective stories featuring gangsters and fedoras who say miye. At first, magazines like Ergosi published stories for every taste. Issues would feature all sorts of genres: a science fiction story, aviation tales, mystery stories, and western adventures. These magazines soon specialized in one particular genre, with publications like Black Mask publishing mystery stories and Weird Tales taking the crown for fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah, if you heard of Weird Tales before, that's the magazine where Robert E. Howard would sell his stories to. Alright. It was in Black Mass that we were introduced to the likes of Dashiell Hammett, Carol John DeLay, Earl Stanley Gardner, Paul Kane, and the legend Raymond Chandler. These stories inspired and were adapted into some of the best film noir movies a few decades later. And radio shows. The height of pulp was between the world wars, when the world was suffering a crippling depression and an influx in crime brought on by a perfect storm of corruption, a bad economy, and prohibition. It was in this time that the hard-boiled cop, or private eye, like Chandler's Philip Marlowe, Hammett's Sam Spade, Spillane's Mike Hammer, and McDonald's Lou Archer were personified. Their world was black and white, and they were the good guys. Alright, Mike Hammer. He kind of looks like James Bond a little bit. Alright. History repeats itself. What's old is now new, and you only have to look back at old newspapers to see the same themes of Wall Street corruption, racism, and disbelief in the government. The heroes in these stories reached out to people in their idealization, being lone wolves fighting injustice. They're talking about themselves. In the post-war period, these pulps turned into paperback novels, which, like the pulp rags, featured bright and exciting cover artwork depicting lurid scenes of action intrigue that was matched in the prose of the books. I feel like a comma should have been inserted somewhere in there. It was during this time that gave rise to the men's magazines that writers like Maria Puzo and Stephen King cut their teeth in before they were household names. Oh yeah, Stephen King did write a few pulps. As the pulps influenced noir, the men's mags begat action movies. It's not hard to imagine Sam Spade and John McClane drinking at a bar as kindred spirits. So that's the brief history of pulp fiction. We intend to write another chapter in these storied pages. Bringing the pulps to the 21st century is one of our goals. Stay tuned and stay classy. Alright, yeah, that is actually a very good summary of what pulps were. They started off as just like cheap entertainment, but eventually they kind of became a genre with its own criteria. So, and before we get into the heroes, we're going to ask Google a few more questions. How long did the pulp era... Alright, Pulp Fiction time period. Let's see. Okay, no, not the movie. Alright, so emerged in the early 20th century and was characterized by, till the late 50s. I think it was longer than that. I mean, if we're going to count like the early murder mystery stuff, then the time period would be starting in the 1880s. And right. And then you get things like Elric, which debuted in the 70s, and technically Elric is considered a pulp figure. So you got a whole genre of these books, or a whole whatever of these books, lasting for, if we're going to count the earlier stuff, almost 90 years, which is crazy that it lasted that long. But then again, a lot of stuff happened where cheap entertainment was highly sought after, and the publishers delivered. So, there you go. Alright. Now, we're gonna get into the fun part. List of pulp heroes. Should we do in ordered, ranked, or wiki? Let's do in order. Okay, well, that's not going to. Alright, so let's open up two different tabs. We're going to first open Wikipedia, and alright. That's right, DC did quite a few pulp heroes. And I don't consider comic books to be pulp, so... Okay, that's a completely different thing. It's not. Alright. Okay, let's... Oh dear. Okay, well, we'll go through some of these and see what looks interesting. Alright, so starting off strong with Doc Savage. That is one I have heard so much about. Edgar Rice Burroughs characters, fine. Fu Manchu, that's another one I've heard about. Call of Atlantis, Philip Marlowe. Okay, why is this? Well, this is also kind of a janky list. Alright. How about top 15 greatest pulp comic heroes? So, I know I said comics I don't consider to be pulp, but apparently the other lists are not going to help us out, so let's take a look. Alright, I'm gonna skip the intro. Alright. Number 15, The Spider. I've heard about this one too. The Spider is a masked vigilante determined to bring down villains of NYC while hiding his secret life as a wealthy socialite, Richard Wentworth. Wentworth returned home from his service in World War I to find mobs and criminals ravaging his city. So he adopted the persona of the Spider to deal out violent justice using his gift for disguise and voice mimicry to confuse his enemies. Although his look has changed over the years, the Spider typically wears a fedora-style hat, a mask, and a cape. Alright, so... And his first appearance was in 1933, and they are still making comics about him today. That one threw me for a loop there because I had no idea what he was talking about, but Daredevil. No, not the Daredevil you're thinking about. This is the first and original Daredevil, first published in 1940. Bart Hill, later renamed Bill Hart, endured a shocking scene as a boy when his father was murdered in front of him. The killer branded Bart's chest as a reminder to keep quiet. The experience left him mute, but he grew up determined to avenge his father's death and see justice done in the world. Bart learned to become an expert fighter, choosing a boomerang as his weapon of choice. Okay. In honor of the boomerang-shaped branding scar on his chest. Interesting. And a little aside, for my birthday, my boyfriend got me the collection of Daredevil Battles Hitler. And it's got that cover where he's throwing the boomerang and Hitler, it's like an actual photo head of Hitler, but he's got cartoon hands and his eyes are like bugging out like he's tweaking. And it's very, very, very funny. Alright. So this version of Daredevil is a public domain character. Oh, nice! Alright, when Dynamite Comics used the character in their Project Superpower series, the creators updated Daredevil's costume into a sentient being with useful but mysterious abilities. Huh. Oh yeah, and above, the Spider was inspired by and created as a direct competitor to the Shadow, who I'm very certain is going to show up here. Alright, here we are, Doc Savage. Man of Bronze. Alright, so... Clark Savage Jr., publicly known as Doc Savage, was raised from birth to achieve the peak of human training, development, and accomplishment. Savage had no superpowers and doesn't wear a costume, but he uses all his skills to help others and right injustices. True to his moniker, Doc Savage is a medical doctor, a peak-level athlete, a fighting expert, inventor, explorer, scientist, master of disguise and languages, and a keen detective. Because why not give him all the cool abilities? Alright. Doc Savage is sometimes referred to as the first Superman before DC's Man of Steel was created. I mean, I can see it, but we did a stream about Siegel and Schuster a little bit ago, and when it came to the creation of Superman, I don't remember Doc Savage being mentioned. I mean, yeah, both of them were science fiction nerds, but I can't quite remember if Doc Savage was mentioned. You guys correct me in the comments if we did go through that. First appearance in 1933. Conan! Alright, this is the part where we would give you a brief description of the character, but there's no better way to describe the legendary sword-fighting barbarian than through the words of the character's creator, Robert E. Howard. Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a raver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of earth under his sandaled feet. I guess we'll just do a little bit more of a description there. Conan was not Robert E. Howard's first character. Conan actually came pretty late in Howard's career, but he was, like, the prototype for Conan was Kull the Conqueror. And then I guess Howard wasn't satisfied, so after a few more trial runs, he decided to come up with Conan. And Conan was meant to be, yes, he is a barbarian, but he was also meant to be a big criticism of society and civilization. And he's actually a very intelligent character, it's just he's also a barbarian and he has his himbo moments. But we'll get more into Conan a little bit later if we are wanting. Alright, Conan is Cimmerian. Cimmerians are a real but now extinct race of people who occupied the Eurasian steppes between the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, circa 1000 BC. I read that Conan was actually supposed to be somewhat related to the Celts. And there's some artwork where he's wearing a tunic and has, like, Celtic weaponry with him. But I guess Cimmerians were actually real. Neat. Alright, Buck Rogers. There's another one I've heard so much about. Buck Rogers began his heroic career as a soldier during World War I, like you do. When he was exposed to a mysterious gas in a mine, he was trapped in suspended animation for 500 years. Buck awoke in the middle of an intergalactic war between future factions of Earth's government, and later assorted alien invaders. Oh, that's interesting. So basically he got isekai'd. Well, not really isekai'd, but he got isekai'd. Interesting fact, Buck Rogers is one of only 2 characters on this list, the other is Conan the Barbarian, to appear in every form of media as well as video games and tabletop games. That didn't stop them from trying! Alright, first appeared in 1929. Alright, Khazar. Oh, so, Tarzan. Alright, this Khazar is the first character to bear the name Khazar, not the current Marvel character of the same name. Got it? Good. Wait, there's a Marvel character named Khazar? Khazar? Hold on. What the fuck is Khazar? Superhero appearing in American comic books. Interesting. Because he looks a heck of a lot like the Khazar from the Pulps. Maybe Stan Lee lifted this one too. But alright. The first Khazar refers to a young American boy, David Rand, who becomes marooned in the Congo jungle after his family plane crashes. The crash kills his mother, but David and his father survive. Sadly, David's fortunes take a turn for the worst when his father becomes severely injured in an accident, leaving David to fend for himself. David grows up in the jungle with the help of noble jungle animals, including Zar the lion. When David grows into adulthood, he adopts the name Khazar, meaning brother of Zar the lion. Oh. Khazar has no powers or special abilities, but he's able to subtly communicate with wildlife after learning their sounds and mannerisms. Khazar is also a master-level hunter and athlete. Okay. He just kind of looks like rip-off Tarzan, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, interesting fact. Before the original Khazar was replaced by the current Khazar, Kevin Plunder, oh yeah, that guy. He traveled the world with his lion, Zar, and even helped fight alongside the Allies in World War II, because of course he did! First appeared in 1936. Flash Gordon. Flash. Ah. I still can't believe that they got Queen to do the soundtrack for the Flash Gordon movie. And I do want to see that movie. It looks hokey as hell, but I do want to see it because, well, A, I love a good cheesy movie, and B, I also really like Queen. So, before I continue, I need a drink of my LaCroix. Alright, after this article, we're going to switch to YouTube. Alright. Flash Gordon is a college graduate and professional athlete. Early versions of the character depict Flash as a polo player. Oh, like water polo? But the current version of Flash is described as an American football player. Flash is kidnapped and forced into a mission by Dr. Hans Zarkov to stop the planet Mongo from colliding with Earth. Along with his beautiful companion Dale Arden... Wait, hold on. Flash is kidnapped and forced into a mission by the planet Mongo from colliding with Earth. Along with his beautiful companion Dale Arden, Flash and Dr. Zarkov survive a series of conflicts against Mongo's cruel dictator, oh dear, Ming the Merciless. The tree, like, I had to reread that sentence because it went from 0 to 100 real fast. Alright. The trio encounters alien enemies and aliens, including the winged Hawkman and Prince Tun of the Lion Men. Oh, like Hawkman. Alright. Interesting fact, Flash Gordon is the longest-running comic strip in newspaper history. The strip ran almost continuously from its premiere date in 1934 until the strip stopped publication in 2003. Oh, interesting. Phantom Lady. Finally, a chick! I think I've heard of her, too. Phantom Lady's first appearance is notable not for not her starting with her original First appearance is notable for not starting with her origin story. Readers were introduced to the character already at the height of her crime-fighting career. Oh, okay. Sandra Knight, the first incarnation of the character, adopted the name the Phantom Lady to fight criminals at every level of society. Her weapon of choice is a black light gun. Ew. Ugh. Used to blind her enemies and render her invisible. Okay. The same black light technology, I really wish they picked a different name for that, was integrated into the headlights of her car, creating an early version of stealth capability when driving. Okay. Alright, interesting fact. Police Comics #1, the anthology comic where Phantom Lady first appeared, also include the first appearance of the Mouthpiece, Human Bomb, Firebrand, and Plastic Man of DC Comics fame. Well, Plastic Man I do know. And Firebrand to a certain extent, too. Alright, 7, Miss Fury. Okay, she seems like she's got a little bit more going on with her. Marla Drake was given a skin-tight panther suit by her uncle after he returned from a visit with an African voodoo witch doctor. Already starting out weird. The suit provides its wearer with increased strength and agility, similar to a large, powerful cat. Okay. Drake uses the suit to fight a rogues gallery of bizarrely unique criminals and thugs who threaten the city with crimes ranging from kidnapping and murder to theft. As Miss Fury, Marla Drake is the scourge of the criminal underworld, the envy of women, and the subject of desire for men everywhere. Oh, so it's meant to combine action with romance. Okay. Alright, interesting fact. The character of Miss Fury first appeared under the name The Black Fury in 1941, but was later renamed Miss Fury in November of that same year. And I'm not gonna lie, I think it's because of her costume, but I came so close in that paragraph to calling her Miss Furry. Alright, Red Sonja. Alright. One of the more modern pulp characters, Red Sonja was first conceived as an amalgam of older characters found in the writings of Robert E. Howard. While Howard did not specifically create Red Sonja as she's known today, many of her qualities are resembled from Howard's other female creations, including Valeria, Red Sonja of Rogantino, and Dark Agnes of Chatillon? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. In her current incarnation, the red-haired she-devil with a sword is famously known for her bright red hair and a practical chainmail bikini and her undefeated prowess with a sword. Depending on the writer, Red Sonja may be immortal and unbeatable as a result of a sworn oath of service to the god Scathach. Red Sonja's exploits were originally set in the swashbuckling setting of the 16th century. Later, her origin was retconned to fall into the same time period as Conan the Barbarian to make crossovers possible, but the two are frequently seen together. Yeah, I rarely ever see Red Sonja without Conan, so... Alright, interesting fact, the retcon version of Red Sonja hails from Hyrcania? An ancient kingdom in the Middle East. Hyrcania is a real kingdom once situated in an area now occupied by the country of Iran. Stirring up my tea. Alright, number 5. Zorro! My first introduction to Zorro was actually the modern Zorro movies. I watched them with my grandparents. Yeah, The Mask of Zorro from the 90s. So this was my introduction to Zorro. Okay. No, you're not allowed to be tired. Ugh. Don Diego de la Vega, is a wealthy landowner in Southern California during the late 18th and early 19th century. Don Diego swore to uphold justice for the oppressed, impoverished, and downtrodden peasants of the surrounding lands, but he couldn't speak out and act freely against the corruption of the military forces of Spain without risking imprisonment and the loss of his lands. Don Diego chose to adopt the secret identity of El Zorro, the Fox, wearing an all-black costume and mask to fight injustice committed by criminals and corrupt officials everywhere. Like you do. I feel like the reason why there's so many wealthy men with athletic abilities who use his abilities to create a superhero identity and fight crime. I feel like the reason why that occurs so often is because it's like every man's dream, where it's like, yeah, he wants to have his riches and blah, 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 but it's like every man wants to be a hero of some kind and save people. That's like what men strive for. So I think that's the reason why this trope is so common. Using his sword-fighting mastery, his deadly accuracy with a whip, and with the help of his trusty horse, Tornado, Zorro rides into the night, leaving his mark Z as a calling card to his heroic deeds. Interesting fact, Zorro is frequently cited as the fictional inspiration for Bruce Wayne's choice of costumes when he became Batman. It's also common for a Zorro film to be referenced as the movie young Bruce Wayne went to see with his parents the night they were killed. All right, first appearance in 1919. I think that's the earliest one on this list. All right, Mary Marvel. Huh? Wait a minute, Mary Marvel came after Shazam, didn't she? Hold on. No, not the music app. Okay, do. Okay, when did he debut? Debut. Oh my god. Debut. When did he debut? Alright, Wikipedia, save us. Alright, Shazam, Captain Marvel. Alright. Yeah, Captain Marvel came first in 1940. So why isn't Captain Marvel on this list? Why was it Mary Marvel? I know why they did this. They were trying to come up with more female pulp heroes and they ran dry. Okay, we're gonna skip over her because I don't necessarily consider superheroes to be pulp heroes because that's a different thing. Though comic books were printed on cheap paper, so maybe you can consider them pulp heroes. I don't know. Why don't you guys let me know in the comments? Do you think that superheroes count as pulp heroes? If we're just going by the whole they're called pulps because they were printed on cheap paper and they were made accessible to just about anyone. Or if you want to go with the genre requirements that we have nowadays. All right, so number 3, Tarzan. Yeah. As an infant, John Clayton II and his parents were marooned in the jungles of Africa when their ship was scuttled during a storm. Both parents soon died, and Tarzan was found and raised by a tribe of Magani apes who gave John the new name of Tarzan. Raised as an ape, Tarzan developed the strength and agility necessary to survive among the beasts of the jungle. With his superhero mind, Tarzan learned to communicate with the apes, other jungle creatures, and the local human tribes to become the peak of human development in mind and body. Later, Tarzan traveled to England to claim his rightful title as the Viscount of Greystoke, but he would frequently return to the jungle and travel the world on an assortment of adventures. So Tarzan is less about fighting crime and more about adventure. Okay. Alright, interesting fact. Tarzan is the only character on this list to have multiple songs composed about him and named after him. Fascinating. That is very fascinating. All right, number 2, the Phantom. Yes. I remember seeing I used to see the Phantom in newspapers, along with Prince Valiant. I actually have a collection of Prince Valiant books that I inherited from my Nana. I might read them and do an article on them someday. All right. Beware the ghost who walks. Contrary to their reputation, the phantoms are mortals. There's more than one of them. Okay. Are mortals who pass on the responsibilities of their fight against injustice to a new generation when age or death prevents them from continuing to fight injustice around the world. The phantom mantle has been passed down through the centuries, making it appear as if the phantom is immortal. Hence the moniker of the ghost who walks. Interesting. Kit Walker is the 21st Phantom to don the trademark purple bodysuit and domino mask. The Phantom has no superpowers, but he displays above-average athletic ability and intelligence, and operates out of a skull-shaped cave in the jungles of the fictional African country of Bengalia? I have all these words I can't pronounce. All right, interesting fact. The Phantom is the first pulp hero to wear a tight bodysuit and a domino mask with solid white eyes, making him the first spandex-clad hero in the modern superhero era. Okay, so he's the one who defined the look. Yeah. All right. And number 1, we of course have the Shadow. All right. Wealthy socialite Lemmet Cranston lives the high life of culture and parties in the big city. What his acquaintances don't know is that Lamont fights crime as the Shadow, a mysterious figure who can read minds and cloud vision to render himself invisible to criminals everywhere. Wearing his trademark black hat, red-lined cape, and red scarf to cover the lower half of his face, the Shadow strikes unseen and strikes down his enemies before they know he's there. The Shadow is famous for his mental abilities to confuse and disable criminals, and he uses 2 Colt 45 pistols when force is required. The Shadow also develops a vast network of spies and associates to help him gather intelligence on criminal gangs when needed. Okay, maybe it's because I haven't read the original pulps, but for some reason I thought that the Shadow is meant to be like some sort of like more supernatural figure, like a ghost, but that might be because I did read or skimmed through the a couple of Batman crossovers, and the Shadow was kind of portrayed as like a vengeful ghost-ish thing. It has been a long time since I read that series, so please forgive me if I am getting that completely wrong. All right, interesting fact. The creator of the Shadow was first conceived as an ominous narrator of a radio show, Detective Story Hour. It wasn't until the radio show gained in popularity that the Shadow was spun off into his own stories. It first appeared in The Living Shadow, 1931. How we ranked. Shall we figure out how they ranked this? Alright, to create this list, it would be impossible to put each character against the other in a matchup of talents, skills, abilities, and powers because each character has its unique origin and mode of operation. Alright, stronger isn't better. Alright, so they're going by the metric of which characters stick with reading audiences. Well, if that's the case, then why the hell is Mary Marvel here? Why is she here? She doesn't really stick with people as much as the others. In fact, Shazam or like Captain Marvel, he sticks with audiences a lot more than she does. Like, I cannot remember the last time I saw a Mary Marvel comic book being made. Though they'll probably get on that because they're trying desperately to come up with book sales. Good, come on. Catch on fire. Catch on fire. There we go. But there's one more thing I want to look up before we go to YouTube and do a little investigating there. And there's this name, Fu Manchu. I kept seeing his name when looking these up. Okay, so Fu Manchu is a pulp villain. Okay. And I kept hearing this name on and off with my life, and I had no idea what people were talking about with Fu Manchu. And so right now we're going to learn. All right. A supervillain who is introduced in a series of novels by the English author Sax Romner, beginning shortly before World War I and continuing for another 40 years. Featured in cinema, TV, radio, comic strips, and comic books for over 100 years. The archetype of the evil criminal genius and mad scientist, which lending his name to the Fu Manchu mustache. So basically he was like a Chinese stereotype turned mad scientist and criminal overlord? Okay. Alright, well, my curiosity has been satisfied, so let's go to YouTube and see what we can find here. Alright, exit, 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 exit. There we go. Okay. Oh yeah, the Lone Ranger. Why wasn't the Lone Ranger mentioned? Or Dick Tracy. And there are other like pulp heroes that are not like the masked variety. All right. I think we went through that. Shadow Factory. So it looks like this one might give us a few different characters. So let's open this one in a new tab and see where we go from here.
Most comic book collectors know that the first appearance of a superhero was Action Comics #1 in 1938. What a lot of people don't know is what inspired those great early comic book writers. What came before the comic books? Stay tuned for the video.
Nice, nice. Gotta show off the figurines. A press.
Hey YouTube, it's Matt here. Hey, today we're going to be talking about Pulp magazines. So I did a video earlier about Conan the Barbarian who came from these Pulp magazines, but that was not the only character. In fact, we think comic books started in 1938. Now, the comic book where it was an illustrated comic, that did. The superhero genre started in 1938. Now that we know that there was a platinum age and that goes on further than that. But as far as this storytelling about these great characters, I'm going to have to say Detective Comics #1 is what started that whole genre. But where did that come from?
That's Fu Manchu right there. Or at least a knockoff of him.
It didn't just come out of
Imagine them trying to do a reprint of this guy.
thin air. They didn't just make up a new medium. What they did was they took the type of stories that were being written in these pulp magazines. Now, all a pulp magazine was it was a magazine that had literature. They had short novels in them, if you will, and writers would submit their work to these magazines, The magazine editors would read it and send back whether or not they accepted it or not. And it was highly competitive at the time. Well, anyhow,
that one's fun.
What they did in DC Comics is they kind of took some of the storytelling type. I'm not saying they stole the stories, but they took the style of stories and they illustrated them, and then they made comic books. And now we have the comic books pretty much the way they were from 1938 with Action Comics #1 all the way up to modern day. That medium has been around without a doubt. It's changed, but it's also kind of stayed the same for a long time. Now, in this episode, in this video, I want to discuss 10 of my favorite Pulp magazine characters, and some of them, you're going to be surprised, are actually in comic books even today. Number 10 on this list is Kazar. And now, some of you guys are going to say, wait, Kazar's in comic books. And yes, he absolutely is in comic books. He got his start in Pulp magazines. And what it was he was in a plane, and a plane crashed over top of the Congo. And it talks about his exploits through the jungle and how he befriends animals. And it really was a Tarzan type of a character. And number 10 on the list is Kazar. Number 9 on our list is the Spider. Now, the Spider was a pretty interesting character, and he wasn't Spider-Man. This is a different guy. What the Spider did was he would kill the kingpins of the crime world, and he had a pair of 45s.
Oh, dang, he actually, killed. Okay.
That he would gunsling, and he had a red...
Wait, 45s. That's right, he was inspired by the Shadow, so of course he would have some 45s.
Spider that he would put on people's foreheads, but without a doubt, his most impressive power was the fact that he could control people with his mind. Now, he could voice control, yeah.
Wait, did he? Did this article mention mind control? Because the Shadow could read minds, but... Alright. Gift for disguise, voice mimicry to confuse his enemies. Did he have mind control? Hold on. Okay, Modern Pulp. Today, hero fans value the Spider more than any single character in magazine, except for the Shadow and Doc Savage. It would be very weird if he somehow managed to top the Shadow. Alright, so abilities. Genius intellect, skilled hand-to-hand combat, expert marksman, master of disguise. So it looks like he has no mind-bending abilities. He must have gotten the Shadow and the Spider confused. And let's go back down to the Shadow, because he only has telekinesis from what I... Alright, so he can read minds and cloud vision to render himself invisible. So the Shadow has powers, but it looks like the Spider just has... He's just got Master of Disguise, and he can change his voice to manipulate people.
You know, different criminals, if you will, to do his bidding. And quite an interesting character. The Shadow is what really inspired the Spider. But number 9 on the list is the Spider. Hey, comic book fans, we've all heard of a lawyer who lost his eyesight by acid, whose other 4 senses were greatly enhanced, and eventually he was able to overcome his blindness by having better sight, where he could see both at day and night. Well, I'm not talking about Daredevil, I'm talking about Black Bat. Now, Black Bat was a character in these pulp magazines, and he came out around the same time as Batman
Yeah, about the same time, alright. What the hell?
himself in the comic books. And this guy, I'm telling you, this is Matt Murdock in a nutshell, but 30 years earlier. So now we're wondering where Stan Lee got all of his inspiration for.
Okay. Back Pulp. Alright, when was his debut and when was Batman's debut? Because I swear to God, if it's revealed that Bob Kane refused to credit yet another person. Okay, so Batman. Okay, shut up. No, not Robin. Okay. So Batman, 1939, and the Black Bat first appeared between 1933 and 1934. Oh my God. You know what? I've done my Bob Kane slander in the Bob Kane stream, so we're not going to go into it today. We are just going to continue on with the list and pretend that it is very likely that Bob Kane ripped off another character. And I'm not going to say that Stan Lee also ripped off this character too, because it's kind of obvious that Daredevil is meant to be more or less a ripoff of, well, not, he was more or less inspired, but I think he was inspired by Batman. Anyways, I might be speaking wrong on that, so correct me if I'm wrong.
But yes, Black Bat was a guy who was a lawyer by day, and he pretended that he couldn't see, even though he really could see. And what he would do was he would go and he would fight these criminals that slipped through the cracks of the the judicial system. Yes, it sounds a lot like Daredevil, but number 8 on our list is Black Bat. Number 7 might have inspired another comic book hero.
Is he in a hotel? I think he's in a hotel.
This character we're going to talk about was a very rich, wealthy sleuth who could fight crime, and his money was not a question. He could do whatever he wanted, but he went around and dressed in disguises, had all kinds of gadgets for tricks. And no, we're not talking about Batman. We are talking about the Phantom. Now, like I said, he was a wealthy detective, and he went around the world solving crime. In fact, if you guys think about it, Batman got his introduction in Detective Comics 27. So yes, Batman was a detective at the very beginning. Yeah, he had a lot of gadgets and had a cool story, but the Phantom sounds like a great inspiration for the comic book Batman. Number 7 on our list is the Phantom. Number 6 on our list.
This is quickly becoming an episode of just how many characters did Bob Kane rip off to make Batman?
Is the Avenger. Now, this is another wealthy guy who, even though he was a
looks suspiciously like the Shadow, but without the scarf.
young man, he was married and had a daughter. Now, what happened to his wife and daughter was they were on a plane that was hijacked and they were kidnapped. Well, this kind of drove the young man mad. In fact, his hair turned white because of his stress, and they didn't call it stress, but just his shock. And all the muscles in...
I don't know who he looks like on that cover, but he looks like what's that comedy actor from The Smoking Gun? Oh, no, wait, The Naked Gun, I think it was. No, not the new one. The old one. Okay. That's not what I wanted either. Oh my God. Leslie Nielsen. Yeah, that guy, he kind of looks like Leslie Nielsen in that cover.
In his face were useless to him, and his face was kind of a putty. That kind of came in handy in the story because he was able to alter the image of his face to be any character that he had wanted. So, long story short, he goes out and he finds his wife and his daughter and finds out that they were murdered.
Aww.
And this makes the Avenger want to pursue crime even more. So, number 6 on our list of top pulp fiction characters, the Avenger. Number 5 on our list is Domino Lady. Domino Lady was an absolutely interesting character. She was a Los Angeles socialite, and her district attorney father was murdered. So this motivated her to fight crime in her own way. And without a doubt, Domino Lady was a very attractive young lady, and she used that appeal to woo these criminals. And what she would do is she would eventually end up killing them. And her 2 greatest weapons was a syringe of knockout serum and also a .45 pistol. So, number 5.
45 pistol. There's going to be a lot of those, aren't there? But yeah, why didn't the list include her?
5 on our list is Domino Lady. Number 4 is a character you probably heard of, Buck Rogers. Now, what Buck Rogers was he was a returning World War I veteran that ended up getting caught in suspended animation and awoke in the 25th century. Yes, you heard that right. Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Well, anyhow, yes, eventually he goes on to space, adventures. But originally what he was doing was the Germans had won World War I in this storyline. And he was trying to defend the remnants of America in the 25th century. And because it was a futuristic world, it did lead him into outer space eventually.
Yeah.
And this was a big inspiration for the Flash Gordon character. So, number 4 on our list is...
He also looks like a... crap... I'm blanking. Sorry. Yeah. Adam Strange. Yeah, he looks a lot like Adam Strange, too. Now that I'm thinking about it. Don't make fun of me for having to spell it out because I am in a brain fog right now.
Buck Rogers. Number 3 on our list is another well-known character, and Zorro. Now, Zorro was a character in the 16th century Southern California, the Spanish colonial times. And he was trying to right wrongs, and he ended up, he always wore a mask, and his weapons of choice were a whip and a small sword. The sword, a rapier, if you will, he would always put his calling card where he would cross a Z out onto the wall or something, or a door frame,
or someone's
to
forehead,
show people who was there. And he would steal from the rich and give to the poor. Number 3 is Zorro. Number 2 on our list is the Shadow. Now, the Shadow has an interesting origin in that he didn't come originally from the pulp magazines. He actually came from radio. Now, what it was he was a voice narrator for a different show.
That does lead to the question of how do we even classify pulp, especially when in the very, very, very beginning, pulp was just a collection of different genres. It wasn't one thing. But there was pulp romance, pulp westerns, pulp detective stories, pulp war stories, all sorts of different pulps. And then you get to the fact, like with the Shadow, where he didn't originate from the pulps. So do we still technically consider him a pulp character because he didn't come from the pulps? Or is he a pulp character because he fits our now list of criteria of pulp fiction? It is a very interesting debate. You guys let me know in the comments what you think.
And they called him the Shadow. Well, people were interested in this Shadow character who was just a narrator on the radio.
I know that Razorfish sure as hell loves the Shadow.
Eventually, they started writing stories, and which seems to be a very common theme at the time. He was wealthy. He used his money to form a disguise. He tried to fight crime. And eventually, it wasn't enough for this character that he wanted to fake his own death and create all these aliases. He wanted to be multiple people, and he wanted to fight crime. Number 2 on our list is the Shadow.
Interesting. And I find it interesting that he didn't talk about the Shadow's abilities. So, I thought we'd watch a video about the Shadow to talk about all of him.
Number 1 on our list, it can arguably be considered the first comic book superhero ever. In fact, he was a pretty big inspiration for Superman. And
it's Doc Savage.
This is none other than Doc Savage. Now, Doc Savage was an extremely brilliant man who had multiple degrees in medicine and science, and he was a doctor. He also had extreme physical abilities and was a martial artist, and he would go around fighting crime and using his degrees in science, or his knowledge in science, to help him solve these crimes. And eventually, he lands himself into DC Comics. Every now and then, you'll see Doc Savage in comic books yet again. So, for number 1, who may be considered the earliest comic book hero ever, Doc Savage. Now, for some honorable mention shout-outs, we're going to say Solomon Kane was one. Dark Agnes was another character that came out of the Pulp Fiction magazines. G8, Captain Future.
Dark Agnes. Oh, yeah. That was one of the... I'm an idiot. That was one of the women named for the Red Sonja entry in that article. My goodness, should not be this tired. All right. Okay. So before we dive into a video, I'm just a little baffled that he did not mention the Shadow's abilities, because I knew about the Shadow's abilities, and the fact that he attributed those to the spider is very peculiar. Okay, fictional character. Abilities. Alright, expert. Skilled marksman, master of disguise. Alright, various psychic abilities, low-level telekinesis, and low-level superhuman. Alright. Alright. Oh, curious. To origins. Alright, Booth Street and Smith Publications hired David Chrisman on the Ruff and Ryan advertising agency and writer-director William Sweets to adapt the magazine's stories into radio stories, or a radio series. Chrisman and Sweets... wait, did he originate in the Pulps? Okay, so... Alright, develops... Alright. So no, it started as a literary. Okay, now I'm confused. Alright. Narrated by a mysterious storyteller with a sinister voice. Oh, so they were creating a new series to help advertise for their current magazine. And then once they realized they had a cash cow, they're like, why don't we just make stories about this guy? Alright, one of the scriptwriters suggested various possibilities, such as the inspector or the sleuth. And Charlotte then proposed the ideal name for the phantom announcer, the Shadow. And thus, The Shadow has the name given to the mysterious narrator of the Detective Story Hour radio program. The narrator was initially voiced by James Lacordo, who was replaced after 4 months by prolific character actor Frank Reddick Jr. Episodes were drawn from the detective story magazines issued by Street and Smith, the nation's oldest and largest publisher of pulp magazines at the time. Although the latter company had hoped the radio broadcast would boost the declining sales of Detective Story magazine, the result was quite different. Listeners found the sinister announcer much more compelling than the other. So basically, the Shadow was created by accident. The Shadow was an oops baby. He was a creative oops baby. They soon began asking news dealers for copies of that Shadow. They said that Shadow Detective magazine, even though it did not exist. Okay, that is funny as hell. Alright. Recognizing the demand and responding promptly, circulation manager Railson of Street and Smith commissioned Walter B. Gibson to begin writing stories about the Shadow, using the pen name of Maxwell Grant, and claiming the stories were from the Shadow's private annals, as told to him. Okay. I just find it so funny that it wasn't even the Shadow's radio drama. It was just narrated stories by... It was just the pulp stories from this publication that were created into the Shadow because so many people liked the narrator more than the actual stories. Alright. Sequels, reboots, character development. Alright. Upturned collar or standard black business suit. 1940s comics, the later comic book series, the 1994 film starring Alec Baldwin. Oh yeah, there was a film! He wore either the black hat or a wide-brimmed black fedora and a crimson scarf just below the nose and across his mouth and chin. Alright. Alright. Alright, so in the print adventures, his name is Ken Arnold, but turns out to not be his real name, which I guess he did commit, or not, he did fake his own death in order to. Alright. Okay, variety of agents who aid his war on crime. His best-known alter ego is Lamont Cranston, a wealthy young man about town. So he's actually a real character, but the Shadow just uses his identity. Because the two men resembled each other. Alright. Okay, so he wasn't originally Lamont Cranston. That's just one of his aliases. Okay. Okay. Might just go ahead and... I want to hear the opening of the Shadow radio show. Because I believe all the episodes are available. Yes, college is a scam. With, 220 videos. Okay, well, let's at least listen to the opening jingle.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of thrilling adventures of the Shadow are on the air, brought to you each week at this time by your neighborhood blue coal dealer. These dramatizations are designed to demonstrate forcibly to old and young alike that crime does not pay.
Such a chipper voice.
Shadow knows. Coast Guard approaching. Dive, you hear me? United States Coast Guard ship is almost over us. We're trapped.
United States Coast Guard patrol reporting. Sighted submarine. Submarine sunk.
The United States Coast Guard packs a deadly wallop, and the Axis knows it. Like to take a good crack at the Axis yourself? Then join the Coast Guard. You'll have plenty of action, plenty of thrill.
Of course! Of course, it was an Army recruit ad the whole time!
And the sure knowledge that you're doing your bit for your country on the front lines of defense. If you are qualified as a machinist, carpenter, cook, or yeoman, you may get immediate petty officer rating. See your nearest Coast Guard recruiting station right away. Teach the Axis that for nations just as for men,
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The Shadow knows.
Well, that was fun. I'm not gonna play the whole radio episodes because I think I'll get dinged. So, all right. Well, since we already did a little bit more investigation on the Shadow, how about we do a Doc Savage? Let's see if you think you know Doc Savage. Okay, Okay, so now you think you know comics. Oh, that's right, the Shadow does do a couple of crossovers with Doc Savage because both were pulp heroes. Alright, well, let's go back to Michael K. Vaughan because he usually has some pretty good videos.
Let me strive every moment of my life to make myself better and better, to the best of my ability, that all may profit by it. Let me think of the right and lend all my assistance to those who need it, with no regard for anything but justice. Let me take what comes with a smile, without loss of courage. Let me be considerate of my country, of my fellow citizens, and my associates in everything I say and do. Let me do right to all and wrong to no man. That is the oath of Doc Savage. Yes, my friends, finally, at long last, after many promises, it's time to talk about this guy, Doc Savage.
Is he
Doc Savage,
bitch
the
slapping
pulp
a
adventure
black lady?
hero. You could also call him a pulp adventure superhero because he was one of the prototypes for the superheroes which proliferate in our comic books and our theaters today. Doc Savage came before all those. He came before all those superheroes. And boy, did those comic books steal a lot from this. I'm telling you. So this is Doc Savage. Doc Savage, who was created for the pulp magazines for Street and Smith. The premiere issue of Doc Savage arrived on the newsstands in March of 19 33, Street and Smith wanted to come up with an adventure hero to go along with the Shadow, who was really popular. So they came up with Doc Savage. Now, Doc Savage was officially created by Henry W. Ralston, John L. Nanovic, and
I wonder how many Shadow radio dramas were originally supposed to be a Doc Savage story, but they kind of got melded in together.
Lester Dent. Lester Dent, who wrote almost all of the Shadow novels. He didn't write them all, but he wrote most of them. And he wrote under the house name of Kenneth Robeson. Every pulp issue of Doc Savage would come out, and the novel, whatever the novel was, would be written by Kenneth Robeson. Doc Savage was a fascinating character. Like I said, he was a prototype for these superheroes that we know today. There's another exciting Doc Savage hanging on the car there. Doc Savage was many things. He was a scientist. He was a surgeon. He was an inventor. He was a detective. He was an athlete. He was all kinds of things. If you could think of it, Doc Savage was it. Because he was the ultimate in physical and mental perfection. He knew martial arts. He could fight all kinds of ways. He knew every weapon on Earth. This guy, he knew pretty much everything. Doc Savage did. Doc Savage, his real identity is Clark Savage Jr. You see, there was a guy called Clark Savage Sr., and he was just sort of a sick psychopath, because what he did, Clark Savage Sr., he took himself and a group of scientists, and when poor little Savage here, poor little Clark Savage Jr. was just an infant, they started training him to be...
How do you train a baby?
A physical and mental marvel. They trained him every day of his little life until he became the greatest at just about everything. He's sort of a prototype for many superheroes. You see a lot of Batman in here, actually. When we think of the pulp prototypes of Batman, we most often think of the Shadow, with good reason. He was a creepy, scary guy who fought criminals. But when you think of how Batman actually became Batman, he went out of his way to train to become the greatest detective the world has ever known, to become a physical marvel, to be able to fight anybody in combat. He trained himself up to be a superhero. That is straight from Doc Savage, only Doc Savage was even more intense because he had no choice in the matter.
It's kind of...
He was forced to do this by his dad, who...
It's actually quite a... That's kind of a sick origin. I mean, not sick in the cool way, but sick as in a really... Oh, you know, if modern comic book creators got a hold of Doc Savage, they would give Doc Savage all of the daddy issues. Again, turning to Wikipedia, because I'm lazy. Right's wrong and punishes evildoers. Alright, Street Smith publication. Material. Published, da-da-da. So Doc Savage was more or less Yeah, he was after. Okay. So he came after the Shadow. So the Shadow did not accidentally steal from him. Alright. We're contemporary readers. Stories are not reprinted in chronological order, which is annoying when they do that. Martial arts.
Was a nut, I think. I mean, he never, I don't think, referred to his father as a psychopath, but I'm kind of getting the idea he might have been a little nuts, this guy's dad.
Okay, DC, for the love of God, do not let Tom King touch Doc Savage. You know Tom King is going to make Doc Savage the biggest pussy on the planet who wants to suck on his mother's teat. So do not put Tom King in charge of Doc Savage.
Well, his insanity was our game, because this guy saves the world all the time and is always preventing horrible destruction. He's always preventing crimes and terrorism and all kinds of stuff. If there's a problem, this is the guy to go to. I'm telling you, Doc Savage. This guy had adventure after adventure after adventure. I mean, he was something, this guy, Doc Savage. He had to be. He was trained that way since he was just a little kid. Like I said, what you gonna do, man? Good thing he took to it. The Man of Bronze. He was called the Man of Bronze because he looked like a bronze statue when he just stood there. And this guy had pulp adventure after pulp adventure, Doc Savage. He was very popular, and he was for a long time. He died out when all the other pulp magazines died out. But for a while, you could always go to your newsstand and get a copy of Doc Savage and just have a great old time. Now,
Okay, and he's probably going to go into book recommendations, but I'll leave the video there for now because he gave a decent enough overview. So let's switch to a different topic about pulp, because something I have noticed is pulp is coming back. Like, people are returning to the old pulp stories, and old pulp characters are getting a reboot of sorts. In fact, let's go to my Twitter real quick. Or my X account. I hate calling it X. It's... what? Why are you there? I don't want you. I want my stuff. Oh yeah, this is my X, by the way. Heather_Feely. If you want to contact me in any way, you can contact me there. But anyways, I recently picked up the Solomon Kane #1 from Titan Comics. Like, Solomon Kane is coming back, and there hasn't been a Solomon Kane comic for, I think, 15 years. And, of course, you got the Dick Tracy comics that are coming out, and Green Hornet has still been going around, even though I don't know if Green Hornet would be considered pulp. But yeah, all of these different pulp heroes are coming back because people want these heroes again. So that does beg the question of why. No, not Pulp Fiction. For fuck's sake, not Pulp Fiction. Wrong. Bad. Alright, why pulp matters. Pulp culture. Alright, so looks like I think we may have played this video before, but I don't know. Let's see, maybe it'll come back to me.
What were the pulps? Cheaply printed, luridly illustrated, sensationally written magazines of fiction. Were they any good? No.
What?
They were great.
Ah, you got me there.
Hello and welcome to Pulp Culture. I'm Nate Price, and today let's discuss why pulp matters.
I want one of those old typewriters so bad. I mean, the main reason I have this keyboard is because I like the clicky-clacky sounds that the buttons make. But it would be so cool to have an old-school typewriter, even though I can't spell for shit. Which is funny because I'm a writer.
Because the pulps did so much more than entertain. They became the very foundation of American pop culture. They defined classic genres, invented new ones, and inspired countless creators long after the printers stopped running. Without them, there would be no Star Wars, no Star Trek, no Indiana Jones, no Batman, no Superman. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with So, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the term Pulp Fiction? Damn it, Tarantino!
Oh good, I'm not the only
what's
one.
the second thing you think of? Yeah, that's more like it. Those iconic, beautifully painted covers of strong men, beautiful women, and a hint of danger lurking within every issue.
This has been such a debate on X where they keep mentioning in like bookstores that all of the covers are either super generic, they're super bland, or they're not really meant to invoke any emotion. Like, how can you get excited about these covers because they look boring? I know he has not you. He has talked about this. John A. Douglas. He's talked about this several times when it comes to book design. Like, especially in the Books for Men argument. I guess, okay, we're probably not going to find it on here right now, but he makes these videos where he goes into like a Target or a Barnes & Noble just to check out the fantasy section, and it's all very abstract or very generic looking covers that don't really tell you anything that's going to happen in the novel, and it gives off romance or romantasy. You know, like those super erotic stories, but they don't want you to think it's super erotic, so they put in these pretty covers to hide the fact that it's erotic. Anyways, and it doesn't get the blood pumping like the older covers do, and I think that's one of the reasons Pulp is making a comeback is they're exciting. They look cool and fun, even though they're old stories. They look cool and fun. Right.
Covers designed to stick in the mind of everyone who passed the newsstand, and with art by the likes of Norman Saunders, Margaret Brundage, and Hugh J. Ward, they sure did. Heck, the cover art was so important, sometimes the stories were created for them instead of the other way around.
That's actually pretty funny.
Moreover, many of the visual cues found in the artwork would end up becoming synonymous with the genres they, covered. Adventure stories brimmed with lush jungles and lost civilizations, traversed by bold explorers dressed in khakis, and women adorned in leopard skin bikinis.
Wait a minute, guys, is that why you like khaki so much? I'm curious, is that really why you guys like khaki so much?
Mysteries now took place in dark city streets, roamed by trenchcoat-clad detectives and femme fatales. And this new thing called science fiction, it's filled with robots, rocket ships, and ray guns. The pulps give them all a distinct visual identity that iconography would then carry on to other mediums, be it film, television, or even comics. But we already knew the covers were great. What about Now, Pulp does have a bit of a reputation for printing cheap stories on even cheaper paper, and it's not entirely unearned. That was the business model for these magazines, after all. And the worst of these stories were often formulaic, exploitative, and downright racist. But you have to remember...
Yeah, I mean, you gotta keep in mind, a good chunk of these were created, like, in the early 20th century. So yeah, it's gonna be there.
Most of these writers weren't trying to pen the next great American novel. They just wanted to get paid. And once the Great Depression hit, people were desperate for any kind of escapism. Even so, that reputation dismisses the impact pulp fiction made on literature and entertainment, as several new genres and influential works made their debut in the pulps. Science fiction as we know it wouldn't exist without Hugo Gernsback's amazing stories, introducing the genre to the public, or John W. Campbell ushering in its golden age as the editor of astounding science fiction. It was in these cheaply printed pages that we'd get stories like Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy and the early works of Robert Heinlein. Even Campbell made his own special contribution with the story Who Goes There? But you're probably more familiar with its film adaptation. The concepts of interstellar empires, faster than light travel, and the laws of robotics all started here.
I read a comment on The Amazing Lolly's review of the Conan the Barbarian movie, and it made a good point. I think another reason why people are more drawn to the old pulp stories is the modern audience has kind of taken for granted the genres we have today. They've taken for granted that they've taken science fiction for granted. They took fantasy for granted. And the general audience does not think, where did these genres come from? Where are their roots? And we want to believe that, it was created by these greats. They wanted to craft these amazing stories. But in reality, they came from pulp. And sure, quite a few of them did care about whether or not their stories were good. But they were quick entertainment to keep people in the Depression from hanging themselves. So, and it's fascinating to go back to all of these stories and see where the DNA for our modern genres came from. It's like Ancestry.com, but for stories. And also, another thing I had in mind is, it's a term I like to call subversion brain, where you become so used to the subversion of a genre, the subversion of like a trope or a genre, that when you see it in its true form, you think it's revolutionary, or you are just shocked by it, even though the original trope has been there for how many decades. One that I thought of recently, well, not recently, this happened like a couple months ago. It was this video essay talking about the anime Frieren, and Frieren is supposed to be a fantasy genre. It's a fantasy anime. But in Frieren, they have this race called demons, and the demons in there are classified as evil. They are just pure evil. All they want to do is cause destruction. They only learn the ways of humans and learn how to the speech of humans to manipulate them into giving them power. Well, apparently quite a few people thought it was offensive and also thought it was racist. How dare you classify the demons as evil? How dare demons that come from hell are considered purely evil in this universe? And it's like, guys, demons being the good guys have only really was a thing for the last, I don't want to say 30 years, but at least the last 15 years, where you have like the tragic, sympathetic devil Spawn, or I guess you could say 30 years because we got Spawn. But it's like, guys, no, that's the original trope. You're seeing the original trope. This isn't a subversion or in racism. You're looking at the original trope. You just can't recognize it because you're so used to subversion. And even for me, with some of the Conan stories, because Conan and Solomon Kane. And I will admit, I was one of those people originally who thought of Conan as just this big dumb brute who slung around his sword. And I didn't realize until I started reading the actual Conan stories, what I had in mind was either the subversion or the parody version of Conan in my head. I didn't know who Conan actually was until I went back and saw the original stories. And it's like, oh, actually, this looks really subversive. But then I had to remind myself, no, it's not subversive. This is the actual stuff. You just didn't know it was the actual stuff because you're so used to the subversion and the parody. And again, going back, seeing what the DNA of the story is. Like, where did this all come from? Why was it successful? And why do we love it?
Meanwhile, Black Mask magazine introduced a new cynical take on crime and mystery. An outlook so tough you'd call it hard-boiled. Crimes weren't solved by posh gentlemen sleuths, but down-on-their-luck detectives fighting against a corrupt justice system. Private Eyes didn't look like Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot. No, they looked like Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, and Mike Hammer. Women aren't just damsels in distress. They're ace reporters and femme fatales. Murder isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a tragedy caused by desperate people in desperate situations.
And that is probably indicative of the time, because again, Great Depression, crime is seen in a very different light here.
It was this line of thinking that gave us classics like The Big Sleep and The Maltese Falcon. That grit and inner torment would make its way into horror and fantasy too, with the help of Weird Tales, the unique magazine home to the iconic works of Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. Howard brought that hard-boiled attitude and fast-paced action to the fantasy genre. His heroes weren't valiant knights slaying dragons in medieval Europe. They were morally gray warriors fighting for fortune and glory in a prehistoric age inspired by Howard's love of ancient history. And no character exemplified that sword and sorcery philosophy better than his most famous creation, Conan the Barbarian. Meanwhile, H.P. Lovecraft introduced his own philosophy on horror.
Okay. I probably should have done a different angle of that because it looked like he was opening a book with a giant dick in it.
At a time when most horror stories dealt with sadistic killers or supernatural threats, Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos haunted readers with existential dread, with our insignificance in an uncaring universe,
not generic man.
home to cosmic horrors beyond our comprehension. Be it Shoggoths, the color out of space, or even Great Cthulhu himself. Of course, we can't discuss pulp fiction without mentioning its most famous contribution to pop culture, the pulp hero, super scientist Doc Savage, the swashbuckling caballero Zorro, the sultry Domino Lady, and the costumed crime fighter known only as the Shadow. These characters and many others laid the groundwork for our favorite superheroes, with the use of dual identities, colorful costumes, and their unique brand of vigilante justice. Without them, we wouldn't have Batman or Superman, let alone a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And just in case you're still not convinced, here are a few more famous writers who either contributed to or got their start in the pulps. Upton Sinclair, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Earl Stanley Gardner, Agatha Christie, Jack London, Robert Bloch, Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, Philip K. Dick, Frank Herbert, and Louis L'Amour. Now, let's bring this video to a close with Before we continue, there is an important matter that needs to be addressed. While I might look fondly on the pulps in this video and in future episodes, it won't be through rose-colored glasses. They gave us mythic heroes and imaginative stories, but the pulps also perpetuated many harmful and racist stereotypes.
Yeah.
For many, this is a cardinal sin they can't overlook. And that's okay. I don't intend to either, but it is my hope that I can still show you the value of these works and how we might learn from them.
I mean, it is good to warn people that, yeah, there are some racist tones here. Like the Fu Manchu character we looked at, he is absolutely a racist stereotype of a Chinaman. And even with the Savage Tales of Solomon Kane, there is a certain old-timey word for black people that's used very frequently when Kane goes to Africa. And yeah, you can acknowledge the racism while understanding what was good in those pulps in the first place. That is the only modernization where I can agree with when it comes to the pulp stories. Like, acknowledge that the racism of the era was there, but can we tone it down a little bit? I mean, not in the cultural sense, but within, like, the heroes and what they come across in their adventures.
From them, so we don't repeat their mistakes. Because the true legacy of the pulps lives on in the hearts and projects of those they inspired. In the larger-than-life characters. Thrilling action, and exotic locales. They survive in our space operas, heroic fantasies, and weird mysteries. In Tales of the Distant Past, or the far-off future. From the deepest jungles
Oh, that's creepy.
to a galaxy far, far away. Their influence can be found in everything, from film to video games. They inspire us to shoot for the stars, face our fears, and fight injustice. They're dated, yet timeless. Cheesy, and sincere. Without them, the world just wouldn't be as fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a good note to end on, where, yeah, they are old-timey, and yeah, they had some, they did reflect the views of the time in some less pleasant ways, but they are the bedrock for our modern genres, and I think the reason why people are turning back to that is because we're getting sick and tired of big companies bastardizing these genres to make a quick buck. And not even in the understandable, yeah, we're just making this cash grab so we can make some dollars. No. I mean, well, we need to earn a lot of money, but we also need to add in a few subliminal messages ourselves. And, prove that we're good people. We don't need you to prove you're a good person. We just need you to deliver a good movie. That's all we are asking of you. Alright, so I think that would be enough time. I don't know if I'm going to make it to all the way 2 hours, but I think an hour and 15 minutes is good. So, I feel like this is still just a very shallow dip into the pulp fiction genre. So, if you guys have any suggestions for me looking into different pulp characters, pulp writers, pulp artists, let me know either in my comments or on my X account, because I'm happy for the feedback, and I want to entertain and I seek to please. So, if you enjoyed tonight's stream, leave a like, and I shall see you in the next one.